Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. I'm excited to be talking to a longtime MKB member, Maritere Bellas. Many of you already know her. She is hello, she's already on. We're going to be talking today. She's an award-winning author and parenting expert. Many of you have seen her books in addition to ones that she's translated. There's Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie, and also a children's book, I Have a Secret, Tengo un Secreto. To becoming really a voice for Latina immigrant parents and talking about bilingualism, biculturalism. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are
Good.
you?
It is so great to talk with you.
Oh, it's so nice. I know we've been planning this for a while. So,
Yes,
first of all, are you better? I know you were sick. Are you feeling better?
Thank you for asking. Yes, I'm doing much better now. It's kind of worked its way through the family, so I'm better, and the kids are kind of getting there. but I think we're a little bit. That is it. Just it's just that time of year. It seems like there's always something going around, which I know you know all about.
Yeah, and it's always the kids that they go to school or they're playing with friends and they come home with all the germs and we get sick and
Yes.
I remember those days. I actually miss them.
I'm sure I will someday. Yes. It is easier now that mine are older. But I'm excited to be talking with you because I think, so many of us get started on this journey when we become parents and getting into vlogging and so on. And yet you have been doing this for so long. There are a lot of people that kind of jump onto, I don't know if I want to say like it's trendy necessarily, but that are kind of joining on now and seeing the benefits of bilingualism, of raising kids in more than one culture. And yet you have been doing this for a very long time before it was really that popular. And so it's so fun to get to talk with you and talk about kind of your whole journey to coming to this and how things have changed. I mean, I think when you started, you were doing like a newspaper column, isn't that, or a magazine column, isn't that correct?
Yeah, it was 1995. I'm dating myself now. And I was raising my kids with three cultures. I think, my husband's Greek American, and I'm from Puerto Rico. And of course, the American culture, we were surrounded by it. So we wanted the three cultures at home, and we chose the two languages, Spanish and English, but my husband didn't speak Spanish. So I was the only Spanish input at the time. And, it was hard to kind of try to find the balance. And, I would go try to, Google and all that wasn't around that early, talk to people and try to get more information. And there was really nothing out there. Also, there was nothing in Spanish for the parents that were, Spanish, that only spoke Spanish. And, a lot of these parents were Latinx immigrants that were immigrating. And so there, unless you went to the doctor's office, there was a magazine there, a couple magazines there that I ended up writing for. One of them still exists 30 years later, Ser Padres magazine. And it was only at the pediatrician's office that you could get a copy of it. And then there was also Healthy Kids in Espanol. So it so happened that I had done some work for La Opinión newspaper here in LA. I met the editor who then became the publisher, and we became really good friends. And she was also Mexican descent. Her grandparents started the newspaper and wanted her kids to be bilingual as well. So I called her up and I was like, I can't find anything in Espanol for parents like us to try to figure this out. And she's like, why don't you write the column? So I started writing. So the column ran every week for 12 years. And it was interesting because there were no emails yet. So the parents would call the editor's office and would ask them, can she write about this or can she write about that? So I would get, the editor then would call me and say, this parent called us and they want you to write about this topic. And I'm like, okay. So there I went to the library or to talk to Spanish to speech language pathologists or to doctors or to educators. And then we get that information and include that at that. So I treated it like, you know, I have a journalism background. So it was more like an article and always providing some kind of resource so parents could go and find it after. So, you know, 30 years later, to almost 30 years later, I'm so excited that there's a bilingual, multilingual, multicultural community. We have resources like in Multilingual Kids Blogs. There's so much more out there, and it just makes me happy that all the parents that are now raising kids have all these resources.
Yes, it is, and even if you don't live in a community that is particularly supportive or where there are a lot of resources, thanks to the internet, we can find so many more. And of course, you have your books, you have a podcast, and your blog and your website is such a wonderful resource. I'm just curious though, so when you look back to when you started, and of course, as you mentioned, there really weren't the resources available then, but have the questions changed? Have the concerns, like when you think back on what the people would call into the editor asking about, has that changed to the kind of questions that you get today?
Well, you know, I've been in this space for a while now, like you say. We are definitely more educated about the benefits and advantages of raising bilingual or multilingual. We know so much more. And parents today are, you know, they've gone to college and, you know, they expect more, they want more, they understand the value of raising a bilingual child or multilingual child, the value of preserving the culture. And studies have proven that we're all born with a multilingual brain. And, you know, so all those studies started coming out, I would say 2011, 2012, maybe. And that's how I was asked to write my first book, which is an ebook, Raising Bilingual Children. And, you know, that gave me the opportunity to go out there, find families that were raising bilingual kids, and share, you know, how is it going for you? What are you doing? Because whoever ends up reading this, it was like a guide, if you will. It's very easy reading, and I included like 102 suggestions on how to raise bilingual kids at the time. So, you know, there was not a lot of books. I think Adam Beck, our friend Adam Beck, was in Japan writing also about raising bilingual kids, but we didn't know each other at the time, which I wish I had, because I would have definitely, you know, and since then we've collaborated and done things together. But so, you know, he was over there at the other end of the world, and I was over here trying to help the parents in the United States. But I would say that, you know, we're more educated, we know more, but we're still, all these years later, dealing with the myths that, you know, raising kids with 2 or more languages is confusing, there's language delays. And the more palpable is, you know, having to explain our language choices to the school system or to a parent that we run into in the park, and we're speaking in Spanish, and they all look at us like, you know, we're in America type of thing. So we're still dealing with that. And a school system that, you know, as you know, they kind of not cater to bilingual children or bilingual families. So that is still happening today, unfortunately. But it's getting better. It's getting better. And it makes me super happy that, you know, expert moms in the different fields in this community are talking about it. You know, our friend Deandra from Bilingual Playdate, she talks about it a lot. And then Claudia from Laleo, she is an expert on, you know, speech language pathologies, bilingual speechy as well. They put a lot out there about, you know, dealing with the bilingual child and the milestones and how to really, you know, educate the parent on what questions to ask and how do I know if I need an expert kind of thing. So all that makes me really happy that, those resources are out there for parents today.
Yes. And I love that your podcast, for example, really helps highlight these different issues, and you often interview different experts or parents about their experiences and their expertise. And as you mentioned, your books, you also have the Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie. What do you hope that people take away from your books? Because I know a lot of your emphasis is on sharing experiences, letting people know that they're not the only ones, but also sharing, like you said, you make it easy to read, really practical tips and suggestions. What do you hope people take away from it?
That I want them to feel like they're not alone. When they look at especially the Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie book, Raising Bicultural Children. Again, I talked to a lot of parents that were trying to raise the kids with different cultures, and I wrote about their experience, and I want parents to feel hope, like, oh my gosh, yes, I can do this, and my family is different from this family, but maybe there's something that family is doing that is working for them. Maybe I can adopt that. And so I think it's also a conversation resource, because all of a sudden, if two parents are reading it, they can talk about it. Oh, I could totally relate to this chapter, but tell me about this other chapter. What did you think? And so I think that, I want parents to feel hope. Same with the podcast. 4 years ago, I realized, there's not a lot out there in Spanish for parents. Today we have a whole bunch of them, and that's wonderful, but not necessarily like our podcast. So, we really went beyond the United States, parents raising kids in the United States, and we went and found, thankful to social media for this, we found families, Latino families, Latinx families that are living all over the world, and they wanted to share how they were keeping and preserving their Latinx culture in the new country that they are living in. So all those, experiences and all those interviews and all those topics, the podcast is now listened to in 27 countries around the world. And it just is wonderful. Erica and I couldn't be happier. And, we do this very simple. We record via Zoom. We don't have all the headphones and all that, because none of us are, she does the technical part. So bravo for her, because I do all the other stuff. But no, I'm not a tech person at all, as I think my audience would know. I always say, confession, I'm not a tech person. But anyway, it works out. And I think that's the goal. The goal is that parents feel supported, and maybe reflect on the fact that, yeah, I want to preserve the culture. I was 18 years old when I was studying abroad, my first 2 years of college, and I was babysitting for this family that was French, and there were 3 kids in the family. And all those kids were like between 4 and 8, and they spoke 3-4 languages. Like, would turn around and speak in French, turn around, speak English, and was speaking Spanish to me because they knew I knew Spanish. It was amazing. It was fascinating. And I was in a school where there were cultures from all over the world. So that was my first. I had grown up with the Puerto Rican and the American culture, but being surrounded by all Turkey and Greece and Lebanon and Iran and so many countries, that it was just amazing to learn from the differences and the similarities that we all share. So I think it was then at 18 when I decided I want my kids to be multilingual and multicultural, at least with 2 languages. So it's been an amazing experience, and I am convinced that it wasn't perfect in my house because, I didn't have a lot of resources. I just went by instinct.
Mm-hmm.
And my instinct said, well, my husband can speak English to them and I can speak in Spanish. And then years later, that became OPOL, one parent, one language, and the method. And, it works for us, but I think now we have a whole method, different methods, and parents out there should study all of them and see what's best for their family. There is no same pattern for everyone. Every family is different. We all have different set of circumstances, experiences, different routines. So parents have to find what works for them and then pick that. And whatever method they pick might change a year from then. You know what I mean? Because of the children's interests, and so because you're trying to make this a fun experience for the children. You don't want them to feel like, oh my God, there she goes again with the language. No, you want to make it part of their daily lives and have them enjoy it and fun and be proud of it. That I think that was my main, especially with the culture, it was my main thing. I wanted my children to be proud of the cultures that they had, the heritage cultures in their lives.
Yeah. And so much of what you do can really apply to all families who are trying to have multilingual, multicultural families. And yet, as you said, you also are focusing specifically on Latinx families, especially immigrant families. What are some of the particular challenges that they face that maybe aren't, or I don't know, do you think that they do have particular challenges versus other families who might be trying to do this?
That is a loaded question. It'll take us a while to answer. No. We still, like I mentioned earlier, we still face language oppression in so many levels. This. Many of my new bilingual parenting experts now in the midst of raising children live, they know this. Still having to explain our language choices, still being criticized or judged, still having to deal with school evaluations that don't take into account their bilingualism. The list goes on and on. I want Latinx families to know that they're not alone, that there is a whole bilingual parenting community behind them, to educate them, to offer resources, to offer support. And your blog is a wonderful resource for parents, and the Read Your World, and we now have so much more. I always tell parents every time I go do a parent talk that regardless of where they live, we are all raising multicultural children. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important that early on we expose children to not only Latinx books with Latinx by Latinx authors and messages and stories, but all cultures. And now we do that. The Asian community has bilingual books, the Indian community as well. It's fascinating, and I'm so proud to be part of that whole community and to send people. Every time I go to a talk, I always send them, go here, go there, right. Follow this person, follow that person. So because when I win, you win. We all, this is what I think our goal is just to help the families and be there and make them feel like, they know who to go to when they need help.
Yes, because as you said, sometimes quite often, unfortunately, the schools are not the best support or resource for that. So it's wonderful, like you say, that there's so many more resources available. But I just want to touch a little bit on, I'm glad that you brought up the idea of language oppression, because the reality is that me speaking Spanish to my kids, or say a French mom speaking French to her kids, even here in the US, that's very different than say my Mexican friend in the US speaking Spanish to her kids, because it's just the reality of how people are treated differently, how different languages are valued, or what the reasoning of people reading into a situation, or the reasoning, of course, people are, it's going to be very different for one group of people than another. And so that's something we say we love kids learning a second language, but only if it's certain languages or only in certain contexts. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, that is something that a lot of parents, especially Latinx or any immigrant families, really are facing. And I also just want to talk about how, as you said, that it can be so challenging to raise bilingual and bicultural children, and yet you really emphasize that although there are these challenges, there are also so many rewards. So what are some of the benefits that you have discovered about doing this journey, that it's, you know, that it's so worthwhile?
Well, you know, my journey had its ups and downs. My kids grew up in a monolingual neighborhood where Spanish was only spoken in the house, and I was the only one doing it. We did go to Puerto Rico once a year for the summer, and they were immersed in the culture and learned to love it. To this day, they love Puerto Rican food and have fun memories of their visits. Keeping up with the language was a struggle, but I did the best I could. We did have a group of Latino parents from other Latino countries, and we would get together maybe once or twice a month. So, and they were, you know, then they would listen to all the different, like the Argentinian accent and the Peruvian accent, and we learned to love all the foods because we would, you know, we would all cook and get together for dinners and stuff. But my daughter took Spanish from 5th grade to high school, and then she did a semester abroad in Madrid. And you know, going back to pick her up and having long conversations with her in Spanish was amazing. And my son, he speaks it well, but he doesn't write it well. Although he surprises me all the time. You know, sometimes he translates something that he's doing for work, and then like, Mom, is this okay? And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. So I did something right. But I'm convinced that they are bilingual, even though it's not perfect. And if they are thrown somewhere in the world where they have to speak Spanish, they'll be fine. But in regards to culture, my kids grew up, like I mentioned, with 3 cultures, the Greek, Puerto Rican, and American. And I'm convinced that, you know, they're in their early 30s now. I am convinced they are the young adults that they are today because of that upbringing. They're aware and knowledgeable of the world around them. They're compassionate, they're kind, they're respectful of others, they're accepting of others. And to me, that's a major win. So I think that that's why I always tell parents, you know, learn the cultures from your kids' friends. You know, when they start school, ask the teacher, you know, what cultures are represented. Let's just, so, you know, I want my kid, the goal is for your child to come home and say, I have a new friend, not to say, I have a new friend that has dark skin, or I have a new friend that, you know, their eyes are this way. I have a new friend. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the beauty of, you know, starting early on and exposing them to all the cultures early on. I think that's what you asked me. I don't know. I'm rambling here.
No, that is because I think, especially for those of us whose kids are still kind of in process, I guess you could say, who are still kids. I mean, it's so gratifying to hear you talk about how is coming as far as your children's language journey, you know, that they really do have these skills, that it was worth investing all that time and effort into it. But also, like you said, just the fact of how they are in the world and how accepting they are of differences, and excited about diversity and seeing diversity as a strength. I think that is something that really, when it comes down to it, that's the goal, right? That's what we're all trying to do. And so that is really wonderful to hear that. I think very encouraging for all of us. And I just want to wrap up, because I want to be respectful of your time, but I'm just curious, what's next for you? Do you have any projects on the horizon, or what is your main focus right now?
Yeah, I'm working on bilingual children's book manuscripts. I have 2 works in progress. One is finished, and those 3 manuscripts are with Junito as a character. So it's kind of like, you know, part of the series, if you will. Then I have a book coming out early 2025. It was supposed to be 2024. So I was like, oh no, but it's okay. You know, I think my goal for 2024 is to write more books that highlight the Latinx Hispanic culture, you know, more books with stories and characters that our Latinx children can identify with, and books that can teach children that are not Latinx about the culture, the beauty of the culture. I'm also now scheduling school visits for the winter. I do this in person and on virtually. And, you know, to be honest, just I want to write more stories in 2024. And I'm looking for a literary agent. So if you know anyone, let me know.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing your books, and we'll definitely be sharing that on our page when those come out. And thank you for all that you've done over the years to inspire the rest of us, and for taking the time to talk with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for asking me and inviting me. And I love all the work that you guys are doing, and I'm there to support you 100%.
Thank you so much. And for anybody that's joining us late, this will be up on Instagram in just a few moments, and then it will be up later on our YouTube channel. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.